What happens when a simple question about country music turns into a full-blown war between one of Nashville's biggest stars and a daytime television host? In just 20 seconds, Blake Shelton went from charming guest to public enemy number one on Tamron Hall's stage. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals. Last night's episode of Tamron Hall started like any other. The audience was packed, the energy was high, and Blake Shelton walked out with that trademark grin everyone knows from The Voice. He waved to the crowd, gave Tamron a hug, and settled into the guest chair. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. But beneath that friendly surface, something was brewing that would explode in a way nobody could have predicted. Tamron started with the usual pleasantries, asking Blake about his latest album and tour dates. He answered with jokes and stories, getting laughs from the audience. They talked about The Voice, about working with other coaches, about finding new talent. Blake was relaxed, clearly comfortable. He told a funny story that had the audience roaring. The audience loved him. Tamron smiled and nodded along. But then, about 8 minutes in, she shifted gears in a way that would change everything. "Blake, I want to talk about something that's been making headlines," Tamron said, her tone changing slightly. The smile was still there, but something else was in her voice now, something more serious. There's been a lot of discussion in the country music community about diversity and representation. Some artists have spoken out about feeling excluded from mainstream country radio and major award shows. Artists who've been making incredible music, but can't seem to break through certain barriers. What's your take on that? Blake's smile faded just a little. He sat up straighter in his chair, and you could see him processing the question. "Well, Tamron, country music is for everybody. Always has been. I think the genre is more open now than it's ever been. We've got artists from all different backgrounds making waves right now." "But is it really?" Tamron pressed, and now her smile was completely gone. "When you look at the actual numbers, when you look at who gets played on country radio during prime hours, who headlines the big festivals, who wins the major awards year after year, it's still overwhelmingly white artists. The data shows that pretty clearly. Don't you think there's a problem there?" The audience got quiet. You could feel the energy in the room shift. Blake's jaw tightened. He crossed his arms, then uncrossed them, trying to figure out where to put his hands. "I think talent rises to the top. That's how it works in any business. You can't force diversity for the sake of checking boxes. The music has to be good first. It has to connect with people. That's what matters." "So the music from artists of color doesn't connect with people?" Tamron asked her, eyebrows raised. "Is that what you're suggesting?" "No, that's not what I'm saying," Blake replied quickly, holding up his hands. "Don't put words in my mouth. I'm saying that the best music wins. The songs that connect with audiences, that's what gets played. That's what succeeds." "But who decides what's the best music?" Tamron countered, leaning forward now. "Who decides what gets a chance to connect with audiences in the first place? Because if certain artists aren't even getting their music played on the radio, how can audiences connect with it?" Tamron leaned forward. "So you're saying artists of color in country music aren't as talented? That's why they're not getting the same opportunities?" "That's not what I said at all," Blake shot back, his voice getting sharper. "Don't twist my words. I'm saying the industry rewards great music. Period. It doesn't matter what color you are." "But clearly it does matter," Tamron countered, "because we can look at the history of country music and see how black artists created so much of what we know as country today, but they've been erased from that narrative. And even now, talented artists like Mickey Guyton and Kane Brown have talked openly about the struggles they face." "Are you saying they're making it up?" "No, I'm not saying they're making it up," Blake said, his frustration growing. "But I'm also not going to sit here and be lectured about how country music is racist. I've been in this business for over 20 years. I know these people." Blake shifted uncomfortably. "That's a question for radio programmers, not for me. I don't control the radio. I just make music." But you have relationships with those programmers, Tamron pressed. You have influence. Pretending you have no role in it, that's not really honest, is it? I never said I was innocent of anything, Blake said, his voice getting tighter. But you're acting like I personally keep artists of color off the radio, and that's just not true. But isn't your silence part of the problem? Tamron asked. When you see these inequities and say nothing, doesn't that maintain the status quo? But you benefit from those decisions, Tamron said, and her voice had an edge now. You benefit from a system that has historically favored artists who look like you. So when you say the system is fair and talent rises to the top, that's an easy thing to say when the system has worked in your favor your entire career. When you've never had to face those barriers. Blake's face started to flush red. Hold on. What do you want me to do? Apologize for being successful? Apologize for working my ass off for over 20 years to get where I am? Nobody handed me anything. I played every bar and honky-tonk in Oklahoma before anyone even knew my name. I slept in my truck. I ate ramen noodles for months. But you struggled with certain advantages, Tamron replied, matching his energy. You struggled knowing that when you walked into those radio stations, they could see themselves in you. That's not something every artist gets. So you're saying my success is just because I'm white? Blake asked, his voice rising. That I didn't earn what I have? I'm saying you earned your success, and you had certain advantages. Both things can be true, Tamron said, but you seem unable to accept that second part. Because it diminishes everything I've done, Blake said. It makes it sound like my success is some accident instead of my talent and hard work. Only if you're looking for an excuse to be offended, Tamron countered. Acknowledging privilege doesn't erase your accomplishments. Blake stood up then, and the sudden movement made several audience members jump. You know what? I understand. I understand that you're trying to lecture me on my own industry, an industry you're not part of. Tamron stood up too. I don't need to be inside the industry to see the numbers, to hear the stories, to recognize documented patterns. No one's asking you to apologize for your success, Tamron replied, but acknowledging that the playing field isn't level, that you had certain advantages other artists didn't have, that doesn't take anything away from your hard work. It just means recognizing reality. It just means having some perspective beyond your own experience. The reality is that you invited me on your show to ambush me, Blake said, his voice getting louder. Several audience members gasped. Others leaned forward in their seats. Your producers specifically told my team this would be fun and lighthearted. They said we'd talk about music and the voice. And now you're trying to paint me as some kind of villain because I'm a white guy who's been successful in country music. This is exactly the kind of gotcha journalism that people hate, the audience murmured loudly now. Some people nodded in agreement. Others shook their heads. The energy in the room was completely divided. Tamron held up her hand, trying to quiet them down. Blake, asking you about important issues in your industry isn't an ambush. These are conversations that need to happen. These are questions that matter. Then have those conversations with people who signed up for them, Blake fired back. Don't lure me here under false pretenses. That's dishonest, and you know it. Nothing about this is dishonest, Tamron said firmly. You're a public figure with a huge platform in an industry facing serious questions. That makes these questions fair game. What's necessary is not tricking your guests, Blake said, jabbing his finger toward her. My publicist would never have booked this if your people had been upfront about your agenda. There is no agenda except truth, Tamron said, her eyes flashing. Except asking hard questions. Except not letting powerful people off the hook just because they're used to softball interviews. Not like this, they don't, Blake snapped, pointing at her with a shaking hand. You're not trying to have a conversation. You're trying to trap me into saying something you can use against me. You're trying to get me to either condemn my entire industry or look like an asshole who doesn't care about diversity. Those are my only options in your little game, aren't they? And then you'll clip whatever I say, take it out of context, and let it go viral so people can tear me apart online. That's paranoid, and you know it, Tamron said, but her voice had an edge now. I'm not trying to trap you. I'm trying to get you to engage with a real issue that affects real people. By attacking me personally, Blake shot back. By suggesting my success is illegitimate. By implying I'm part of the problem instead of just an artist trying to make music and live his life. You are part of the system, Tamron said, taking a step closer to him. Whether you want to acknowledge it or not, you benefit from it. You participate in it. That makes you part of it. And that means you have some responsibility to think about how that system works and who it hurts. I think about it plenty, Blake said, his voice getting even louder. But I'm not going to shit on country music on your show. I'm not going to throw my friends under the bus. I'm not going to condemn an entire community of people who've been nothing but good to me just because you want me to. Nobody's asking you to condemn anyone, Tamron said, her frustration clear now. But you could acknowledge reality. You could say, yes, there are problems, and we need to do better. That's all. But you can't even do that much because you're too busy being defensive. Maybe I'm defensive because I'm being attacked, Blake said, his face now completely flushed with anger. Maybe I'm defensive because you're twisting everything I say to fit your narrative. Maybe I'm defensive because this is exactly the kind of bullshit setup that makes celebrities stop doing talk shows. This isn't a setup, Tamron insisted, her voice rising to match his volume. This is journalism. This is asking tough questions. If you can't handle that, if you can't have a grown-up conversation about these topics without falling apart, then maybe that says more about you than it does about me or my show or my questions. And I'm telling you that opportunities are there for anyone who wants to work hard enough, Blake said, his voice rising even more. I'm living proof that you can come from nothing and make it in this business. You just have to want it bad enough. But you didn't come from nothing in the same way, Tamron countered. You came from nothing economically, maybe, but you didn't come from nothing in terms of how the industry would receive you. You fit the mold of what country music has always promoted. You walked through doors that were already open for people like you. Blake stood up suddenly, and the microphone pack on his belt almost pulled him back down into the chair. He steadied himself, his face completely red now. You know what? I'm done. I came here in good faith to talk about my music and my life, and you turned this into a damn attack on me personally. This is bullshit, the audience gasped louder this time. You could hear people saying, "Oh my God," and "Wow," throughout the studio. Tamron stood up too, facing him directly. Blake, sit down. We're having a conversation. This is what conversations look like when they're about real things. No, we're not having a conversation, Blake said, his hands shaking as he started unhooking his microphone. You're lecturing me. You're putting words in my mouth. You're trying to make me the poster child for everything wrong with country music just because you wanted some viral moment for your show. Just because you want people talking about Tamron Hall tomorrow. That's not fair, and you know it, Tamron shot back. And her voice was rising to match his now. I asked you legitimate questions that every artist in your position should be willing to answer. Questions about your industry and your role in it. If you can't handle that, if you can't have a grown-up conversation about these topics, then maybe that says more about you than it does about me or my show. Maybe it says I'm not going to sit here and be accused of being racist on national television, Blake fired back, pointing at her again. Maybe it says I'm not going to let you put me on trial for the sins of an entire industry that I have no control over. Nobody called you racist, Tamron said, her voice sharp and cutting now. I never used that word. I never even implied it. But the fact that you immediately went there, the fact that you jumped to that conclusion when asked about systemic issues, tells me everything I need to know about how you view these conversations. It tells me you're not actually listening. Blake's whole body was tense now. What it tells you is that I know a setup when I see one. You wanted me to either admit that country music is racist, which would piss off everyone I work with, and destroy my relationships in Nashville, or defend the industry, which would make me look like I don't care about diversity and get me canceled on social media. It's a no-win situation, and you knew it going in. You planned this. Or maybe there's a third option, Tamron said, taking a step toward him, not backing down an inch. Maybe you could acknowledge that there are problems in your industry while also talking about what needs to change. Maybe you could use your massive platform and your influence, all the power you have in Nashville, to actually help address these issues instead of getting defensive and running away. My platform? Blake laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was bitter and angry. You want to talk about platforms? You're using your platform right now to ambush guests and create controversy out of thin air. That's what this is really about. You need ratings. You need people talking about your show on Twitter and Instagram. So you bring on a big name and try to start a fight to get clicks and views. The audience was completely silent now, watching this explosive confrontation unfold in real time. Some people looked scared. Others looked excited. Everyone was locked in. Tamron's eyes flashed with pure anger. You have some nerve. You have some damn nerve. I've been a journalist for decades. I've covered real stories all over the world. I've asked tough questions of presidents and politicians and CEOs and celebrities. Don't you dare suggest that I'm creating fake controversy for ratings. Don't you dare question my integrity. Then what do you call this? Blake demanded, gesturing wildly at the stage, at the cameras, at her. You lured me here under false pretenses. Your producers said we were going to talk about my music and my career and my time on The Voice. They said it would be fun and light. Instead, you wanted to put me on blast about racism in country music. If that's not fake controversy, if that's not a setup, I don't know what the hell is. It's not fake just because it makes you uncomfortable, Tamron said, and her voice was like ice now. These are real issues that real artists are dealing with every single day of their lives. And the fact that you're more concerned about your own discomfort, about protecting your own image, than you are about their experiences and their struggles says everything anyone needs to know. Blake shook his head violently, fumbling with the microphone wire still attached to him. His hands were shaking with anger. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not sitting here while you try to destroy my reputation because I won't say exactly what you want me to say. Because I won't be your puppet. Nobody's destroying your reputation but you, Tamron said coldly, crossing her arms. I gave you an opportunity to show leadership and perspective and compassion. You chose to get defensive and make this all about you. Walk away. That's on you, not me. That's your choice. Leadership? Blake laughed harshly again. You want me to throw my friends and colleagues under the bus to make you happy? You want me to trash the industry that gave me everything, that made my dreams come true? That's not leadership. That's betrayal of the people who believed in me. No, betrayal is staying silent when you have the power to speak up, Tamron countered, her voice rising again. Betrayal is benefiting from an unfair system and refusing to acknowledge it even exists. Betrayal is using your privilege to protect yourself instead of helping others. That's the real betrayal, Blake. Blake finally got his microphone completely unhooked and dropped it on the chair where it landed with a thud. You know what, Tamron? You can keep your moral high ground. You can keep lecturing people from your talk show throne. I'll keep my integrity. I'm not going to let you bully me into saying things I don't believe just so you can feel good about yourself and look like some kind of hero. Bully you? Tamron's voice went up an octave, her eyes wide with disbelief. Are you seriously playing the victim right now? You're a wealthy, successful man with every advantage in the world, with millions of dollars and a huge platform and power in your industry, and you're acting like I'm bullying you by asking you to think about people who don't have those advantages, by asking you to consider perspectives outside your own experience. I'm acting like someone who walked into a trap, Blake said, and his voice was shaking with anger now. I'm acting like someone who's being attacked for things I have no control over, and I'm done being your punching bag for whatever point you're trying to make. Find someone else to prosecute on your damn show. I don't need to prosecute anyone, Tamron said, her eyes blazing with intensity. I just asked questions. Simple, straightforward questions about your industry. If you feel prosecuted, maybe that's your conscience talking. Maybe that's you knowing deep down that there's truth to what I'm saying. Blake grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair and started putting it on with jerky, angry movements. My conscience is fine. I know who I am and what I stand for. I know the work I do and the people I support. I don't need validation from you or anyone else. I don't need to prove myself to you. Clearly, you do need validation, Tamron shot back, taking another step toward him. Because if you were actually secure in your beliefs, if you were actually confident in your position, you wouldn't be running away from a simple conversation. You'd be able to sit here and defend your views without falling apart. It stopped being a conversation the second you made it personal, Blake said, pointing at her again, his finger shaking. You made this about me, instead of about the issues you claim to care so much about. You turned this into an attack on Blake. Shelton, instead of a discussion about country music. That's on you. That's your choice. Everything about this is personal, Tamron said, her voice intense and passionate. That's what you don't get. That's what you're refusing to understand. For the artists who are being shut out, for the fans who never see themselves represented in the music they love, for the young kids who want to pursue country music but don't see anyone who looks like them doing it, this isn't some abstract debate. It's their lives. It's their careers. It's their dreams. And you're too wrapped up in protecting yourself and your image to see that. Blake shook his head one more time. His jaw clenched so tight you could see the muscles working. I see that you're trying to make me the villain in your story. That's what I see. And I'm not going to play along with it. I'm not going to be your villain. Then don't, Tamron said, crossing her arms again, standing her ground. Walk away. Show everyone watching exactly where you stand when things get uncomfortable. Show them what happens when someone with power and privilege gets asked to think about people without those things. Just walk away, Blake. I'm not walking away from anything, Blake said, his voice getting even louder now. I'm standing up for myself. I'm standing up against being ambushed and attacked on television. I'm standing up against your bullshit agenda. If that makes me the bad guy in your eyes, I can live with that. I'll sleep just fine tonight. You can live with it because you don't have to face the consequences, Tamron said, and her voice got softer but somehow more pointed, more cutting. That's privilege, Blake. That's exactly what we're talking about. You can walk away from this conversation and nothing changes for you. Your career continues. Your platform continues. Your life goes on exactly the same. But the artists we're talking about don't have that luxury. They can't walk away from the barriers they face. They have to live with them every single day. Blake stared at her for a long moment, his chest heaving, his face still red with anger. The entire studio was silent except for the humming of cameras and lights. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Then Blake turned his back on her and started walking toward the exit at the side of the stage. Tamron called after him, her voice echoing through the studio. Blake, you're really going to walk out in the middle of the show? You're really going to do this? He stopped and turned back one more time, framed in the doorway, the backstage darkness behind him. The lights caught his face, still flushed with anger, his eyes hard. Watch me, he said, his voice cold and final. This is your choice, Tamron called out. You're choosing to run instead of engage. You're choosing comfort over courage. No, Blake said, pointing at her one last time. I'm choosing not to let you make me into something I'm not. I'm choosing not to play your game. That's my choice, and I'm making it right now. Then go, Tamron said, her voice strong and unwavering. But everyone watching knows what this means. Everyone watching sees what this is. They see a man who refuses to be bullied, Blake said. They see a man who stands up for himself. That's what they see. They see a man who can't handle being challenged, Tamron countered. They see exactly what I've been talking about. Blake didn't respond to that. He just shook his head one final time, turned his back on her again, and walked through the doorway. His footsteps echoed on the backstage concrete, getting quieter and quieter. The cameras stayed on Tamron, who stood there in the middle of her stage, her arms still crossed, her expression unreadable, as Blake Shelton disappeared into the darkness backstage. And then they all heard it, the heavy metal door to the parking lot slamming shut with a thunderous bang that echoed through the entire studio, the sound reverberating off the walls, leaving nothing but stunned silence in its wake.